The federal government's stay-at-home guidelines expire next week, and an overwhelming majority of Americans support the coronavirus protections already in place. According to the latest Associated Press poll, 76% of Americans say they support closing bars and restaurants. People are scared. 68% favor postponing non-essential medical care. 80% support requiring Americans to stay at home unless they have to run essential errands. These are people who are frightened. And 82%
By the way,
favor limiting gatherings
those are
to 10
Republicans.
or fewer people.
Those are Republicans. Those are Democrats. Those are independents. If you go into the crosstabs of these polls, you'll see that Republicans and Democrats are just about at the same place on these issues. There is no red state America or blue state America when it comes to the pandemic. There is just a United States of America who says, why don't we listen to the doctors and scientists instead of politicians who are darting about left and right on stage?
They're talking to their own doctors. Overall, 61% say the step taken by the government to prevent coronavirus infections in their area are about right, while 12% say they go too far. And over half of Americans say it will not be safe to lift restrictions in the next few weeks. They're reading the science here, and a majority of Florida voters say that the state should not loosen social distancing rules. According to a new Quinnipiac University poll, 72% of Florida voters oppose loosening social distancing restrictions by the end of April. That includes 75% of Florida voters over 65 years old. Joe, they're scared.
So listen, I mean, Willie, these numbers are so stark. 80% of Americans support the stay-at-home guidelines right now. 80%, 8 in 10. We haven't seen polls like that since after 9/11. I mean, 80%. 87% of Americans believe what the government's doing right now as far as the stay-at-home orders are either just about right or actually not strong enough. 87%, almost 9 in 10. And 72% of Floridians want the stay-at-home orders and guidelines to stay in place and think that actually getting back at the beginning of May is too soon. So again, you know, people can take what they want from all of that. I have said, I think if social distancing is allowed, people should be able to walk on beaches. People should be able to walk through public parks. People should be able to walk through public spaces.
Yes.
So I may be a little more out there than I think most Americans, but the overwhelming majority of Americans believe that we need to stay locked down at least into May.
Yeah, we've been talking about this, Joe, as a partisan pandemic, I think a term that John Meacham coined. I think that's true from the president's point of view, perhaps from leadership's point of view, but it's actually not, according to the country. There's no red, there's no blue here. You talked about the crosstabs. Let me break this out, this AP poll, because I think it's fascinating. Among Democrats, you might expect this, 95% of Democrats believe that the restrictions are about right or don't go too far. Okay, you might think that makes sense to you. How about Republicans? 78% of Republicans believe the restrictions are about right or don't go far enough. 78% of Republicans when you put those two groups together. So this is not, Casey Hunt, about Republicans running to the side of President Trump. I think it's a case of the president misreading the country. We know he watches television. We know he probably saw some protests on cable news where people were waving his flag. It turns out those were tiny protests, AstroTurf protests, put up by one family or a few guys who posted to Facebook and rallied some people in these cities. But it's not the country. And I'm not just talking about Democrats who don't like Donald Trump. It is not Republicans. Again, 78% of Republicans say these restrictions are about right or don't go far enough.
And this is why, Willie, to Joe's point, what the president is doing in the briefing room every day is he's essentially using the same strategy that he has tried to use throughout the course of his presidency, which is to insist on his own version of reality. But we are now seeing that instead of having a group of Americans that are willing to believe that and follow that no matter what, in the face of whatever other set of information is coming at them from a different place, instead of looking at that through a partisan lens, they're looking at it through the lens that the doctors, the experts, the head of the CDC, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci, the way that they're putting it to them. And if you dig into the trust numbers in these polls, that's increasingly obvious as well. People are saying they don't trust President Trump on this. They do trust the experts on this. And this is why this is such an overwhelming, crisis for this president heading into the fall.
Coming up on Morning Joe, our war against killer germs. A leading epidemiologist shares his strategy to fight the outbreak. Next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.